Super Sentai has a rich history of positive and wholesome entertainment for kids and adults alike, but some seasons of Super Sentai take on a much more mature tone. From dark and depressing story elements to extreme levels of violence, this video is going to rank the darkest and most mature seasons in the history of Super Sentai. So with that out of the way, let's get it started at number 10. Starting off this list is Go Busters, a series with a grittier tone than most other Toku series at the time, whose story becomes noticeably more dark towards the end of the season. Compared to Gokaiger and Kyoryuger, the shows that came before and after, this show has a noticeably more mature presentation and tone, making it reminiscent of a Kamen Rider or Metal Hero season. In fact, many rumors around the industry suggest that this show was originally intended to be a modern continuation of Metal Hero. Add to that the inclusion of Enter and Escape, two complex and interesting villains, and we have a series that's definitely more appealing to an older audience than a lot of other Sentai series. We also have a notable death that I won't spoil here. At first glance, Go Busters seemed like a lighthearted season, and in a lot of ways it was, but this show also featured a lot of dark and heartbreaking elements that landed better with an older audience. I also think that the simple designs of the suits made the team look more like special operatives instead of a typical Sentai team. It made them seem less flashy and more utilitarian instead. Go Busters had a great tone and style that was more appealing to an older audience than most seasons, landing at a spot right here. Our next mature Sentai season is Kaku Ranger, featuring a varied mix of ninjas that fought against the yokai. This show is partially inspired by the famous Chinese book Journey to the West, a story about a varied mix of personalities joining together to go on a journey. This show evolved past the simplicity of a good versus evil story to explore more complex themes. We also see the consequences of what it means to be in a life or death fight and how this can affect one's desires and motivations. This offered a lot of depth to these characters and made them more relatable. The action on this show was hard-hitting and gave a deeper insight into the strategies these rangers implemented, as well as the nature of their equipment. Although Kaku Ranger didn't have anything that a kid couldn't enjoy, the depth and nuance of the story and its characters, along with a darker tone, definitely made it stand out amongst the more kid-friendly seasons. Next up is Go-Go 5, a Sentai themed around emergency services. This show featured a team of 5 siblings going up against the Saima clan. Being themed around emergency services and rescues, this show featured intense action and a sense of serious danger for the team. The main focus of this show was the Kawasaki family, with the story exploring their complex motivations and family dynamic. The characters in Go-Go 5 are generally more fleshed out than in a lot of other Sentai shows. Their surface level character traits are counterbalanced by depth and nuanced characteristics that the show explores more and more over the course of the season. This show focuses on story elements like personal and civic responsibility, as well as sacrifice. We also get a look at the show's villains with greater depth, something that made the show seem pretty fresh and unique. Go-Go 5 was also exceptionally grounded due to focusing on issues that are present in the real world. The fights in this show had a more realistic feel than most Sentai shows, making the action feel more like that of Kamen Rider. Go-Go 5's emergency services theme, along with the character depth and action, made this show feel like a Sentai that could exist within our real world. Next up on our list of mature Sentai seasons is Die Ranger. While this show definitely features some lighthearted elements, it had a gritty tone, a star-crossed love story, and the BDSM-themed Gorma tribe, whose style and story elements practically put this show on the list single-handedly. This show focuses on nuanced and complex themes, like the dichotomy of good versus evil, as well as power and greed, themes that an older audience could definitely relate to. Die Ranger also looked at the villains with a more nuanced lens, featuring depth to their motivations as well as dealing with infighting amongst the group. The action in this show was extremely visceral, and much more violent than other Sentai series. This was something more akin to the action on Kamen Rider Amazon. Ranger told a great story with emotional weight. For Sentai fans that are looking for a season with bone-crunching action, this would be an excellent choice. Our next mature Sentai season is Flashman. This series featured a team of Rangers who were kidnapped by an evil army called Mess, before being rescued and trained on different planets by an alien race called Flash. After they returned to Earth years later, they formed Flashman and fought back against Mess, but because of what is known as the anti-Flash phenomenon, they would only be able to remain on Earth for 1 year before being damaged. Flashman's gritty tone and style were immediately noticeable. This show deals with darker themes than most of the kid-friendly seasons, focusing on things like war and obligation to a cause. Flashman also featured noticeably less comedy than most other seasons. The characters featured here were complex and nuanced, with the writers putting a lot of effort into fleshing out their backstories and exploring their deeper motivations. This show also had a much more violent tone to the action, making it stand out from its peers. Flashman's more gritty and darker tone, combined with complex storytelling methods, make this a great choice if you're looking for a more mature Sentai season. Next up on our list is a Sentai that's mature in an entirely different way than the others. This show is far from dark, but it was made specifically for an older audience and featured a ton of risque adult humor that wouldn't be out of place in a show like South Park. Akiba Ranger also focuses on the struggle of being a middle-aged otaku and parodies a ton of the kid-friendly tropes from throughout the history of Sentai. Because adults were the show's primary target audience, Akiba Ranger had a green light to really lean into crude humor and be as unique as the writers could make it. This show featured tons of elements and characters from the Sentai franchise, but they were presented in a different tone than fans were used to. I also really like the meta quality of the show because it focuses on the team's delusions, and sometimes you don't even know what's real or fake. Akiba Ranger focused on appealing to an older audience, and for the most part it worked great, because despite the lighthearted comedic tone, Toei did a great job at layering in different elements that were extremely relatable to adult fans everywhere. Next on our list is Masked Man. After watching only one episode, it becomes obvious to the audience that this show has a much darker tone compared to other seasons. It's bleak and somber, with way less comedy. Viewers of Masked Man would enjoy the serious tone, a complex love story, and hard-hitting kung fu action. Masked Man explored the forbidden love of Takeru, also known as Red Mask, and Tube's Princess Lao. Some of the elements of this story can be really depressing, as they struggle with the walls and complications between them. Masked Man also dealt with themes of internal conflict and existentialism. The suits and equipment were also decidedly less flashy and more grounded in reality, regardless of the team's use of ki power. With Masked Man, Toei made a decision to go in a darker direction to appeal to a slightly older audience, and the tone and complex story beats definitely delivered on that idea. No list of dark and mature Sentai seasons would be complete without Masked Man. Next is one of the most popular Sentais ever with Jetman. This season had a more serious tone and was also well grounded in reality. It explored complex stories with deep, nuanced characters, and we even had the death of a beloved ranger. In this show, Jetman battled against Vyram, an interesting and unique villain group filled with infighting and a power struggle dynamic. Members of this group, particularly Radiguet, had complex motivations filled with nuance, rather than being motivated simply by being evil. If that wasn't enough, this show also featured a love triangle between 3 of the Rangers that would have been right at home within a Japanese adult drama. Jetman had much less comedy and cartoonish elements compared to other seasons. Jetman's grounded story, love triangle, and complex villains gave this show an unforgettable tone that was surprisingly well balanced. It wasn't necessarily dark, but it did separate itself quite a bit from the more childish seasons, at times being close to a soap opera. It remains one of the most loved seasons of all time, and I think its appeal to an older audience is a big reason why. Coming up next is Live Man, a series that deals with a ton of betrayal, loss, and death. The story tends to be incredibly bleak, with moments of victory overshadowed by unforeseen negative consequences and outcomes that weren't ideal. In this show, the protagonists were students from Academia Island who fought against an organization called Volt as Live Man. Live Man's tone was legendary, with a dark and impactful story that makes audiences care about the outcomes of the deep characters that are here. There are moments of betrayal that will hit you hard, and this is something made evident from the very beginning of the show's intro. This was the final Super Sentai season of the Showa era, and if you ask someone in the community to name a dark and mature Sentai season, you'll hear a ton of fans say Live Man. This show had great villains and lead characters with excellent depth to their personalities, and Live Man is a great choice if you're looking for a dark season from the retro era of Sentai. But guys, you know that not every season could make this list, so here's a few honorable mentions. First is O-Ranger, and yeah, I know that this show became much more lighthearted later on, but in the early episodes this was undeniably a darker and more serious season. This show was the 20th anniversary of Go-Ranger, so Toei wanted to have a darker tone that would appeal to older audiences. Unfortunately, some terrible real-life circumstances happened, like a chemical attack in a subway that ended the lives of 13 people, and an earthquake in Kobe that ended the lives of over 6,000 people. This resulted in a tone shift during the season in response to these events. Even though the show went through a huge tone shift, the early episodes were definitely worthy of an honorable mention here. The next honorable mention is Depressing. And yes, there are a ton of wacky and cartoonish elements to this show, but it's also a detective show that focuses on the different characters' deep and complex motivations, things that an older audience can probably appreciate better than a little kid. The premise of a police team that solved mysteries led to a ton of suspense that set a new standard going forward. This show wasn't satisfied by simply showing the audience that good was fighting evil. Instead, it would use shades of gray to focus on the motivation of both sides and sometimes present the villains as sympathetic characters. Not to mention, I love Deca Rangers, so I never need a whole lot of reason to include it on a video. Samurai Sentai Shinkenger was a fresh take on the Sentai formula, with a samurai theme. Although the franchise's lighthearted tropes were still present, Shinkenger explored more serious themes from time to time like loyalty, belonging, and the struggle with self-doubt. Mako even went through being abandoned by her family and the reconciliation with her parents. This show also featured a memorable Kotoha arc that would see Shinken Yellow overcome her own self-doubt. While not overly violent or dark, Shinkenger makes the list as an honorable mention because a lot of the story elements are things that young adults could relate to more than small children. And now, the number one entry on our list of most mature Sentai seasons is Time Ranger, a show with a serious tone, a story about betrayal, and the struggle to change the past in order to change things about the future. This show would put extra effort into fleshing out the characters and giving them well-developed backstories and motivations. Time Ranger's maturity is effortless, as the show never feels like it's trying too hard to be mature. It just respects its viewers' intelligence and tells an intelligent story. Not to mention, there's quite a bit of depth and violence found throughout. Time Fire! This story almost never presents characters as simply good or simply evil. Even the villains have complex motivations, whether they're justified in their actions or not. They make sacrifices for what they believe in or desire, and this is something that's oftentimes very bittersweet to see happen. Time Ranger also dealt with the often unforeseen consequences of their actions, whether good or bad, and Captain Yuya and Yuri are easily two of the most deep and nuanced characters in the franchise. The tone of Time Ranger and the exceptionally high quality of the writing made this show a must-watch, and as more information was revealed about the characters, it creates intrigue to see what's around the corner. This show ticks all the boxes when it comes to a Sentai season that can be appreciated by adults, and I think it's a great choice for our #1 most mature Sentai season of all time. But those are the seasons that I think are the darkest and most mature. I want to know what you think. Let me know what season you think is the most mature in the comments, and if you're new here, be sure to transform into a subscriber by hitting that subscribe button. Join my Discord server to hang out with me and other cool Toku fans, link in the description, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, it would mean a ton if you smack the out of that like button. Thanks for watching, I'll catch you guys later.